Greetings, Earthlings, and welcome back to Watchcastage. Today we are looking at an extremely popular newish dive watch. This is the Seiko SPB143, and this is more of an affordable option of the Seiko 62 Mass. This gray dial variant on the bracelet comes in at around $1,200, and I will throw a link to some site in the description if you want to check it out. Let's start with the build quality and measurements of this thing. With the bracelet sized up for an 18 centimeter wrist, it comes in at 171 grams. The case diameter comes in at 40.5 millimeters. I actually measured the thickness of this watch to be about 14 millimeters at the center of the case, although a bunch of other measurements are saying 13.2, I believe. I measured 14 millimeters. As far as the lug to lug, that comes in at 47.5 millimeters. However, you do have some protruding center links on the bracelet, and if you include those, this comes in at 52 millimeters. The lug width comes in at 20 millimeters, and it does have drilled lugs, which will make changing the bracelet or the strap much easier. The water resistance on this thing comes in at 200 meters, and that is accomplished with a screw-down crown, which just so happens to be unsigned, nothing fancy there, as well as a screw-down caseback, which is not going to be a display caseback, but it does have some nice graphics there. The crystal on this is going to be a domed sapphire crystal, which has anti-reflective undercoating, no anti-reflective coating on top. The entire case is made out of stainless steel. The bezel that you have is a 120-click dive time bezel with a brushed stainless steel insert. The lume on this watch is going to be Lume Bright. And then as far as the bracelet, I find it to be quite underwhelming, actually. I'm going to hold this up to the microphone so you can hear the noise that it makes. It is a lot more jingly and jangly than I would prefer a $1,200 watch to have. Like many Seiko watches, the adjustment on this is going to be the annoying pin and collar system. The clasp on this thing appears to be partially milled. The interior here looks like it is properly milled, but then the actual clasp, this portion, looks to be pressed, or at least a much lower quality than the actual milling portion here. But other than that, you do have a dual button push deployant system there, which is nice, and you also have a fold over clasp and 4 holes of micro adjustment, so you should be able to get a good fit with this watch. And the last thing that I want to talk about is the diver extension on this bracelet. I hate it, I don't like it, it is unintuitive, and I wish it was not on this watch. In order to release it, you need to hold the top portion of the diver's extension and then push the actual bracelet down, and that unlocks it and allows you to pull it out. And you can see that this is actually all pressed there, and it feels very jingly, jangly, and unimpressive. You can see it just does not look like it was well thought out. Looks like it's going to be stabbing you. But most of us who buy these will not be using a diver's extension, so I doubt that it's going to come into play in terms of stabbing us, but it at least does not feel very high quality. And again, on a $1,200 watch, I would expect the bracelet to be a little bit more well thought out. And the last build quality thing, if you do care about this watch is manufactured in Japan. Then as far as the finishing of the watch, the entire case is going to be brushed. However, you do have this nice polished chamfer edge along the side to add a little bit of interest to it. The bracelet on the watch is also all brushed. The clasp is brushed as well, but you can see you do have the Seiko logo engraved on the fold-over security clasp. Then you have the case back, which is not going to be a display case back, just a basic stainless steel. It does have the basic specs on there as well, but in the center you do have this nice polished wave logo there. Then when we flip the watch back over, we have this really nice black brushed stainless steel bezel with a 60-minute track. and it does have a lume pip at 12 o'clock or at 0. So if you are in a dark room or if you are using this for diving, you will still be able to get that orientation and know how much time you've been diving. The dial on this version of the watch is more of a sunburst gray dial than a black, and I think it works really well. I can understand why some folks would dislike the mismatch between the black bezel and the gray dial, but for me, I think it is a very interesting combination. When we dive a little bit deeper into the dial, you have a minute track printed along the exterior. Then you have the applied indices at the hours, and you also have a double marker at 12 o'clock, which is going to be lumed. This will help give you orientation when you're in dark rooms, or again, if you are actually diving with this. At 3 o'clock, you won't find an index. You will have the date window cutout with a white date wheel and black print. Directly below the 12 o'clock, you will find a printed on Seiko logo. Then above the 6 o'clock, you have the Prospex logo, you have the word automatic, and then divers 200 meters. And lastly, on either side of the 6, you will see that it says Japan 6R35 because this is made in Japan and the movement is the 6R35. And then on the other side of the 6, it says OOKORZ. I have no idea what that means. If somebody knows, tell me in the comments. As far as the hands on this, you have a set of metal baton hands with plenty of lume in every single one of the hands. You even have a lume in the second hand, which extends all the way out to the minute track, really making it easy to read in day or in night. Next up, as far as the specs of this watch, as I already mentioned, the movement in this is Seiko 6R35 movement. That is a 24 joule automatic movement with a 21,600 beats per hour frequency. The power reserve on this comes in at 70 hours. It has a magnetic resistance of only around 60 Gauss. And the accuracy that Seiko lists is between plus 25 and negative 15 seconds a day. Over the 2 months that I was wearing this, I was getting around plus 5 to plus 10 seconds a day, so pretty accurate for an automatic, although I have much more accurate watches and also much less accurate watches. Here is a very quick lume shot. First thing you notice is you do have that lume pip in the bezel. Then you see the hour, the minute, and even the seconds hand with plenty of lume there. And you have all of the hour markers glowing like the sun. And you have the dual marker at 12 o'clock so you can get some orientation in the dark. Really great lume on this Seiko. Pretty damn impressed. And here is how the watch looks on my 18 centimeter wrist. You can see that it does fit really well in terms of case diameter and lug to lug. Even with the 52 millimeters for the center link, it does seem to curve down well enough that it doesn't wear like it has a 52 millimeter lug to lug. And one thing that I noticed about this watch is it does sit kind of high on the wrist at 14 mil. It's not going to be too much of an issue with a sweatshirt or a flannel, but if you're wearing a tighter cuff, you may have some issues getting the watch underneath it. And 14 mil, just a bit too tall for my general liking, but it does still seem to work. Now let's get to the more subjective portion of this video, and we'll start with the pros. The first and most important is the legibility on this thing. This watch is incredibly easy to read in day or in night. The lume on it is insane, and they are more than generous with it. It is even in the bezel. At least you have a little bit of a lume pip, so the bezel is still functional in the dark as well. I also really like the finishing on the bezel. It is not overly shiny. That brushing is a very nice finish. The 200 meters water resistance is also very nice, as you don't really have to worry about this thing getting wet at all. It's going to hold up to everyday use, no issues whatsoever. And the last thing is the drilled lugs. That is always nice to have just to make changing of the bracelet or the strap really easy. And then as far as cons, the main issue that I have with this watch is the bracelet. I wouldn't have much of an issue with it if the watch was around $600, but at $1,200, it feels a little bit underthought. The diver's extension is terrible. It is a bit too jingly-jangly for my liking, and really just not impressed with the bracelet on this thing. Another thing that isn't necessarily an issue for me, but I know a lot of people will dislike, is the white date wheel against the darker dial. That is going to be a bit of a jarring transition looking back and forth there. And lastly, I do think that at 14-ish millimeters, it is a little bit tall, and I would have loved to have seen this come in at around 12.5 mil. And in conclusion, I do think the SPB143 is a great everyday watch, especially if you're looking for a vintage-inspired dive watch and you're more of a fan of Seiko than the Swiss brands. This is a great option and much more affordable than Seiko's 62 mass reissue trilogy, which I think we're going for about $4K a piece. So a much more affordable or achievable, attainable option in that same arena. And I think that is it for this week's video. That was the Seiko SPB143 vintage-inspired dive watch from Seiko, kind of playing off the Seiko 62 mass. Let me know if you enjoyed this watch or if you enjoyed this video. If you did, thumbs up. If you thought it sucked, give me a thumbs down. But tell me what you didn't like about the video, because I'm still trying to learn what I am doing right, what I'm doing wrong here, and trying to serve you the best. I also want to reiterate, I am not a watch expert. I am just sharing my experience with these watches because I always find that fascinating and really informative. Somebody just sharing their everyday experience with a watch as opposed to only experts. Experts have their place and they have helped me a ton. I just want to make it clear I'm not trying to take their position. I'm just a dope sharing my experiences, and hopefully it helps somebody. So let me know what you think in the comments down below, and I will see you in 2 more weeks. To quote, what is it, Total Recall? 2 weeks! 2 weeks! 2 weeks!